So yeah, we'll give it one more minute and just let everybody in here. Mhm.
Angela, did everybody get in, or are you still letting people in?
I'm still letting people in. Some are just now, I mean, everyone is in that's been on the waiting, but a lot of times people don't arrive till a couple of minutes after, so.
Good to see some familiar faces out there. Well, Chris, it is 6:01. Do we want to get started?
It's what?
It is 6:01. Do we want to go ahead and get started?
Okay, are we ready? Welcome, everybody. We're so excited that you guys are joining us for this learning lab entitled CC, Classical Conversations, and Stoa, the Dynamic Duo. I'm really excited to hear what our presenters have tonight. Let me quickly pray for us, and then I'll introduce the two ladies that will be walking you through this evening. I'm really, really excited to hear from them, but let's give thanks to God first. Dear God, we love you and thank you. I just thank you for all of the participants on this call today. I thank you that we live in a country where we're free to be able to educate our children the way that you intended for us to educate them. I thank you for organizations like Classical Conversations and Stoa that allow us to just teach our children to know you and to make you known. I'm thankful that we get to work shoulder to shoulder with another organization such as Classical Conversations. And just be able to make your name known all over the country. We're thankful for tonight. We're thankful for the curriculum and for the teaching that CC does. We're thankful for the competition and excellence that Stoa does. I pray that you'll be with us tonight. I pray that you will continue to bless our two organizations with unity and allow us to work well together. We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, welcome everybody. We're so excited that you joined us. I want to first introduce the two ladies that will be speaking with you tonight and answering a bunch of questions. Right before I do that, I will let you know that the chat is open. So if there's anything that you need to communicate, or if there's any question that you have, then you can put that into the chat and we will gather those. And over the course of the hour, towards the end, they will take questions as we have time. All that said, let me first introduce you to Jeannie DeWitt. She is an electrical engineer turned homeschooler who has been a classical conversational parent for 14 years. She was also a Stoa parent for 3 years when her debate-loving son, who is now a college freshman, was doing debate. For the past 3 years, she's been working with CC full-time as the Director of Sales and Marketing Support, helping CC reach and serve more families. And she's been doing a wonderful job in that. And we're so excited that she is here tonight. And also we have Alyssa Hayes. She began her Stoa journey in 2014 with the oldest of her 10 children. All 10 are wonderful children too. We've enjoyed every moment that we've gotten with them. And she's been deeply involved in the community ever since. She serves as the head debate coach for one of the largest Stoa clubs, where she is passionate about equipping students with critical thinking, communication, and leadership skills. Alyssa graduated from the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs with an emphasis in pre-med and has a strong background in leadership and education. She's a former Prudential Youth Leadership Coach and a graduate of the Center of Creative Leadership Communities Leadership Program. Her experience includes directing multiple classical conversation challenge levels and working with various nonprofits in the Colorado Springs area. In addition to her education and leadership roles, Alyssa is the COO and owner of a landscape design and construction company where she specializes in logistics and marketing. She also serves on the Stoa Marketing Committee, bringing her experience to help grow and strengthen the Stoa community. With a deep love for mentoring students and a heart for service, Alyssa continues to make a lasting impact in both the debate world and beyond. Ladies, we're so excited to hear from you tonight, and I will turn it over to you and let you guys begin. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. That was a pretty big introduction there. So let's see if we can live up to that one, huh, Jeannie? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, but yeah, we were going to tell you just a little bit about our story and how we got into both classical conversations and Stoa. And Jeannie, I'll let you start with that one.
Okay, great. Thanks. For us, Stoa came later in our education journey, and we were introduced to Stoa through classical conversations. And it was through our baby stepping of debate that we did in our CC communities that my son found that he loved Lincoln Douglas debate, and he discovered parliamentary debate through Stoa. We actually tried another speech and debate club first and found that in our area in particular, the Stoa Club was a more vibrant club, but we found also that Stoa focused on skills, and that was really important to us as we continued learning. And he actually went on to compete in NITOC last year and is a college freshman this year. I have a daughter who is a high school junior, and she tried speech and debate, but it's not her favorite thing. And so she's gone on to try other things. She's my more artsy kid. And so we've pursued that love with her. But overall, Stoa, being part of our Stoa community was such a blessing, and it allowed us to take one of my son Ryan's passions to that next step, that next level. So we're so appreciative we were able to be part of it. How about you, Alyssa?
So yeah, somewhat similar. We started quite a while ago in Stoa first, actually, just by a couple of years. And the reason being was that we had heard about this from some friends who were pretty competitive in our local area. And I said to my oldest daughter, I think you'd really like this. And she looked at me and she said, Mom, I will never, ever, ever, ever be one of those people. And so 2 years later, finally, after a friend of hers asked and said the same thing, hey, I think you'd really enjoy the speech and debate thing. She said, oh, absolutely. I'll definitely do that. So we jumped into our Stoa journey, and at about the same time, we actually jumped into our classical conversations journey. So that was quite some time ago. But then I found, go figure, that when I was directing and I was trying to teach these kids what policy debate was, I had no idea what policy debate was. Like, I was completely lost. I had no framework for it. So I reached out, of course, to the club and I said, hey guys, I need your help. Like, I need you to teach me what policy debate is so that I can go help assist these kids. And so that was really where our first connection was made for me, like between the crossover and that integration of, hey guys, I don't have a framework. I need help. And so our local club helped out. They stepped in, the students stepped in, the coach stepped in, and we had a great year in classical conversations because of our help with Stoa. So
That's fantastic.
yeah, so it's been a while now. So we have found a great love for them both. And that's why we're here, is we really want to assist other families in helping to integrate the two, because I know just, from the forefront, they both look like a lot. And I agree, they're both a lot. And so we have felt it, right? But at the same time, I know our motto for this year is worth it. And that's couldn't be more true, right? Is that we look at it and we think, wow, this has been so worth it. That journey together has been incredible.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that was your experience, that your local club supported your local CC community. I think that's, if not anything else, that's the heart of our call, that that would be the best case scenario, because our organizations are so synergistically connected. So why do you think families choose both? In your case, why did your family choose to continue with both?
Yeah, that's always the great question. And I know that there's individuality here, right? I know that we came at it a little bit differently than some other families did. Some other families really were, in Stoa first and then discovered classical conversations later. And so it goes both ways. What I have found is that they're so like-minded in so many different ways. And this is like an amen from a lot of the families that we talk to that have been in both for quite some time, is that we found that we are really trying to get to the same place with these students, right? We are intentional parenting. We care about homeschooling. We care about using these skills to speak boldly. We're not just giving them head knowledge. We actually want them to be able to use it and communicate to others. So I think that's typically why, because it's almost like preaching to the choir, right? So you're in classical conversations, you see what Stoa is doing, you think, oh, really, that's along the same lines of what I already felt was important, and then vice versa and back and forth. Have you noticed that same thing?
I have, and I was just searching at preparing for this call, and I noticed that our mission statements are actually very synergistic too. Classical Conversations is to know God and make him known, and Stoa is to train homeschool students to speak boldly and change the world for Christ. Both of those things just naturally happen together, and I think families sense that, and I think that's a big reason why families will choose to stay with both. I also feel like Classical Conversations seeks to expose students to a whole lot of different subject areas, so they learn broadly. And they also respect the role of the parent, just like Stoa does, as that main teacher of the student. And so by doing so, Classical Conversations prepares them to take that leap and jump off and go deep in whatever they decide they love as part of that educational journey. And I think Stoa provides a great opportunity to go deep or take it to the next level for those students that just fall in love with speech and debate. I also feel like Classical Conversations stresses communication in their rhetorical exercises in the community. And so just from foundations, first year, putting those students up and giving them the opportunity to communicate week after week, it's obvious that both Stoa and Classical Conversations value strong communication skills. So I think they can be very synergistic and give parents a great opportunity to do both.
And I like that you said that whatever they're interested in, we launch them into that. And that's exactly what we're doing, because I get the question often from parents who are not familiar. And they say, so what do these kids end up doing? Do they all end up becoming lawyers or communication majors? And oddly enough, they don't at all, right? And this is what you see, like every time you ask a different student that's graduating out of Stoa or who's graduated a couple of years later, they go into all kinds of different fields. And so I've got some that went into engineering. I've got some that went into computer analysts. I've got some that went into law and pre-law, and some went into business. So all across the board. So these skills are universal. And I think that's what people don't always see at the outset. Oh, it's speech and debate, so it must be for kids who want to be politicians, that kind of thing. Not at all, right? Not at all. So what we're doing is we're preparing them really to go out and speak boldly for Christ.
Right.
And that turns out works in any arena that they're in. And so watching these kids grow up and go all the way through, and then just be able to seek whatever their calling is, that's what we want to empower. And that's every single alumni that has come back to me. And I say, okay, what do you think about your time in Stoa? And what do you think about your time in Classical Conversations? So they always say, I'm so thankful for it. I feel like I was really equipped by that. I feel like it's helped me just be, it's just been advantageous in every situation that I've come against. Anytime I had to stand up and I had to speak in front of a class, or anytime I've had to go into an interview, I feel like I nailed it because I had those skills already. I had practiced those. And I do think that's a huge part of what we're doing here, right?
Absolutely. I agree.
So I know that a lot of people are on this call because it is that scary feeling of I'm on this brink of maybe possibly doing both, or we've been trying to do both, and it just is a lot. It's a lot on my plate. How do we do this? Well, how do we put these two together? How do we integrate them? And I know that that's, Jeannie, we've talked about this is our heart of saying, hey, no, they really can. they really can be put together quite seamlessly a lot of the times. So I know a big question that the community has had for me is what about speeches? How do I do both CC curriculum and then I prepare speeches? How does that look? What did that look like for your family?
Well, I think, can I answer that broadly first? I really feel like it's important to note that in both Stoa and Classical Conversations, whoever's leading that local club, that local community in CC's case, or in Stoa, the local coach, they seek to support the parent. That's the primary reason why they're there. And so leveraging that for the success of your family, communicating to them the goals that you have for your student is so important. They want to come alongside you and support you. And in both places, we also offer fantastic opportunities for community and growth together and supporting each other through whatever's going on in our homeschool life, which we all know is super busy. And so I would really encourage parents to go to the leaders of your local community on either side and let them know what's going on in your life and what your priorities are and what you're trying to do by participating in both. And ask them honestly how that community can support you in that. CC's model empowers parents to be their students' teacher, and it would, the curriculum of Classical Conversations provides tons of topics for speech, for example. In our particular situation, the topics for speech that my son used in community and to practice for his Stoa competitions came from things that he had been exposed to as part of the Classical Conversations curriculum. We also, in our case, we used speech in community when a paper was suggested in the guide. So there were cases where, as part of the coursework, the guide would suggest, we want you to write a 5-paragraph essay on whatever this topic was. But he might have resonated with that topic and chose to apply it as a speech in Stoa. And then I just asked his tutor if he could take that opportunity to present the speech instead of the paper in community so that we weren't doubling up the work. So in those specific examples, we were able to make less work overall by making one thing count for two. How about you, Alyssa? What did you do in your own family with your kids?
Right. It's very, very similar because what we find is the Classical Conversations curriculum is so rich, right? And it's rich with that conversation. And so they're already going into community and they've got these wonderful pieces of literature that they're discussing and they're developing and they're getting the themes behind it and they're contemplating, especially with our curriculum, we're looking at the different aspects of it. And that makes for a really great speech with depth. Right? Because they've already analyzed that piece of literature and then they pick out those elements and those themes that they want to write about. So, and I know that we're going to get to the document later about testimonials that other people have given. But one of them that I got from a family was we start off the year by looking at what are the pieces of literature that we're going to be reading this year? And how could we incorporate those into the speeches that we're writing this year? And that's one of the best ways is because if you're thinking, oh, this one resonates with me, mom, like I really like that piece. I'm really interested in reading that one. I've heard about it, right? Or sometimes, if there's kids that have been in CC for a long time, their older siblings, they've already read that book, right? We see that all the time, right? And so they're like, oh, we're going to read that book again. And I'm so excited because I love that one. Great. Let's think about what would make a good speech, right? So already just from the outset, being intentional as you go into the year about how is that integration going to look. That's a big thing. And I was hesitant as I put together this document that we're going to release on Wednesday about just crossing over and integrating because it's never a 1-for-1, right? There are infinite possibilities with that curriculum and those conversations because in community, so often their interest is piqued on something, right? Somebody says something and all of a sudden they think, oh, wow. That's a topic I really don't know much about, but I really want to explore. And so any of those make for an excellent speech, right? And I think again, it's just getting them to kind of open up and think, what do I want to talk about? What's a platform I'm interested in all of this wonderful curriculum that I've been given. And I don't know. There's the possibilities are endless. That's what's great about it.
Absolutely. And I love how both program helps the parent by preparing them in advance. Both of those things, the Stoa topics, for the debates, and knowing what speeches they're going to participate in the year come along with the guide for the parents. And so even before we're in that crazy rush of the school year, you have some time to look and intentionally plan. And in classical conversations, we would call that scale. And that gives us an opportunity to know in advance so that we're not being reactive as the school year goes on. That's such a blessing. I also have heard from parents that the debate in community is a struggle for them as they try to integrate that level of debate with debate that they might be doing in Stoa. And so I wonder, Alyssa, if you could tell me how your family works with that, how they practice at such a level in their clubs, and how they then participate with their community, with their friends and their peers on program day. How does that work for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. And that's it's a little bit loaded because that in some ways we've had to learn how to do that in community well, right? So
Yeah.
you've got these kids in Stoa who are in debate and they're eating, sleeping, and just breathing debate all the time, right? And they're good at what they do. And then they come into classical conversations, and the intent is not to be rhetorical at it that first year, right? Or that second year. Right. This is an overview of debate. And so sometimes they're a little, we have to teach our students like, hey, just know, like, this is not competitive debate right here. These are students that may have never encountered debate before. So go easy, right? We don't need to talk about all the stock issues right at the beginning, like first hour, right? So chill out a little bit, guys. But the thing is, they're an excellent resource. And just like I talked about, is that your Stoa clubs know what they're doing when it comes to debate, right? And so if you're a director, if you're a student that doesn't feel like they're really kind of grasping that, it's really a great way to just seek out that community and say, okay, where's the Stoa student? Where's the Stoa coach nearby? Can you help us out? We just don't quite understand this aspect of debate. And when we do that together, and in the level that we're at, understanding the intent, I think that brings students in classical conversations that end up really wanting to seek out more about debate versus being more intimidated from it, right? So there's a way to do it really well when you say, okay, I need about this much help from you, Stoa student, right? This is what I'm looking for right here. Can you help me out with this piece? And sure, take that piece. But it doesn't mean that they have to take over the whole strand, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. That's a really good example. I also think in Stoa and classical conversations, both organizations are so well thought out and so intentional and so thorough. They both run the risk of making a student who is going to be the smartest person in the room or the most skilled or gifted person in the room. And I think in both cases, there's an opportunity for the parents to take a step back and recognize that part of this student's education is training them what to do in that situation and how to love their neighbor and be a good servant leader. And those skills are just as important as all of the other academics and communication skills that we're teaching them. Learning self-control and discipline in that moment, and really joining with other members of the community who might not know as much in that particular situation or be as well versed in that particular skill. I think that's a great opportunity. I also think that debate in Stoa offers an opportunity that classical conversation students don't often take advantage of. And that's, number one, repeating something over and over again. I mean, we are classical in classical conversations, and we don't often get the opportunity to take that debate resolution and run it again in a slightly different way, and then run it again and run it again, all in like a 24-hour period. But in Stoa,
Right.
you get that opportunity, and it also offers them an opportunity for disappointment. We're not going to win every debate. How do we handle it when we realize we're not doing very well or we don't win that round? Those are character developing opportunities. And so I think both organizations are providing opportunities for families that we just need to recognize and take advantage of.
And that's excellent. And I can't emphasize that enough, is that a lot of times, and I say this often to families, is you think that we continue to do both organizations because of the skills, right? Yes, I love classical education. I do. I love debate skills. I love speech skills and being able to speak boldly, but it's so much more than that. And sometimes it takes us a couple of years in each organization to pick up on that, is that this is dynamically bigger than those skill sets or that curriculum. This is about community. This is about character. This is about our relationship and our faith with the Lord, and then walking through our students' relationship and faith with them as they grow into this. And so those aspects are just integrated into that so incredibly well. And like you said, I know I ran into Andrew Pudawa one time and we asked him, do you ever get tired of teaching the same thing over and over and over again after all these years? He said, no, not really. He said, because every time I do it, it's a little bit nuanced and I realize aspects of how I could be doing it better. And you're right. That's what we have is the two put together is we have all this knowledge that we're gaining, all this practice that we're getting in community day, but then we go and amplify that with Stoa. And we have all of this repetition that really brings us to that rhetorical stage of now I see how this works better. Now I see how I can be better. Now I can understand the small nuances underneath this. And on top of that, who am I as a person within the competition, within the community day? And all of that is incredibly important. And you're right, both organizations really do put an emphasis on that character, even over the skills, right? Even over the wins, right? That's more important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now here's the thing, and it's always that nitty-gritty question of like, okay, great. Ideally, theoretically, that sounds great, Alyssa and Jeannie. That's wonderful. I love the idea that you're doing both. But what does your typical week look like? And I'm gonna start here a little bit because I think in that sense, it's fair to say that both are a lot. And I think we prefaced with this is the parents who don't feel overwhelmed as much are typically the ones who start off with the intent of kind of looking over the full year and what do we want to achieve this year, right? What is our goal? So if our goal in this challenge year is to really, do this to 99%, right? So we know we're going to kind of fall through the cracks on a couple of things, but we want to do 99% of what's laid out in the guide. We have to be intentional about that, right? We have to lay out our week accordingly. And so the same with Stoa. If we have a student who's like developmentally, I've been doing this for a couple of years. My goal is to get to nationals tournament. And then we talk about, okay, how are we going to do this? What is that going to look like on a weekly basis? So what we do in our household is we start with each student and we sit down with them and we ask them what their intent is for the year. And then we have them draw up a weekly block schedule. And so that is exceedingly helpful in understanding how they're supposed to manage that time and where those crossovers are going to be, right? Then we continue to do that on a weekly basis. Okay, let's look at what we're looking at for this week. And so we can look at the big projects, right? And then we can look at the smaller aspects of it and say, okay, where is the integration here? How are you going to get your Stoa stuff done? How are you going to get your classical conversations pieces done? And then how can we put those together? Where can they really kind of accentuate one another? And it does require some intent, right? If it's just kind of reactionary, it's going to be hard. I agree, because you're going to you're struggling with, gosh, I just don't know how I'm going to write the speech and I don't know how I'm going to do this. But if you just set out kind of the path in the beginning, it's a lot easier to walk it. So for us, I will say block scheduling, looking at the guide, even writing notes in the guide. I know that they're always hesitant. I'm like, write notes in your guide,
Please. Yes.
Yes,
It's
please.
yours. You don't have to pass it
It's
on.
yours. Yes, just write on it and say, hey, this would make a great speech. I'll think about writing that Friday after I read this piece on Monday, right? So just be intentional about that. But absolutely, they work together. And we've been doing it for many, many years now. So it can be done. What
I
about you
love
guys?
the
What is
idea
your
of the block schedule. Yeah, that's neat. When we first started homeschooling, the best article I read was in this Old Schoolhouse magazine, and it talked about new wine and old wineskins. And I go back to that often because I need a little bit of a kick to promote thinking outside the box and thinking perhaps school doesn't have to happen within the hours of the school day that you have decided. It could happen on the weekend on the way to a tournament. It could happen in a little bit over the summer. There are pieces of the goals that my kids have had for their year that have overflowed. And leaving space for that has let us breathe a little bit more. Another thing that's helped me a lot is I can be a bit of a perfectionist. And so when I sat down to write out that schedule, and then in the first, day we got off the schedule, I would want to like crumple it up and write it again. And that would take time and it's not really logical. So we ended up recording what we did. And so we're keeping good records and being responsible homeschoolers, but recording after was better for me and less paralyzing than recording or planning in advance. However, I think as we spoke before about looking ahead in that guide and knowing that the speech that we created perhaps in August might count as a rhetorical activity in community in September to be practiced maybe the first time. And then we could deliver that same speech again later in the year, because there would be such a stark difference for that class to see the growth, but that it would count twice as two separate events, because I've planned out that content that would fit in with that strand, and giving yourself permission to do that. So having plans like that, I think, are really important, and not reacting at the last minute and going, "Ooh, we can't do that. We just need to use something we've got." That was very helpful. Each of my kids learned in different ways, and they've mapped out their days differently. My son was more of a, I need to write it down kind of a kid. And my daughter is more of, I just need to wake up at 7:30 and just start working, and she'll get to it. So leaving space for how your kids learn and how they manage their time as they get older. I'm not saying your 6-year-old would do that very well, but by the time she was 14, she had her day planned out. So leaving space for that was really important too.
I love that. I love revisiting that speech later in the year to see growth, right? What a great idea. Because often there is, right? From that first giving of the speech at the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Wow, hasn't that become so much more polished? And isn't that a motivation and inspiration for others watching that I could get to that level too? It just requires some repetition, some practice. That's an excellent idea. I love that one. I think too, really being intentional about tournament time is very imperative for our family. And what we do, yeah, that's because it's big. I mean, and so we have these, somewhere between 2 to 4 day tournaments. They're all day long. You have to gear up for them, going into them. So you're submitting those speeches online. If you're debate, you're researching, changing your case. And then afterwards, it's a bit of a, wow, I need a breather. Like I need a day to just, hang out and not do anything. And that's students and parents alike, right? I try not to talk to my kids that next day. They're a little bit grumpy. So
So true.
we have an understanding on that one. But when we look at the year, one of the things that we do in the very beginning as a Stoa family is we know what our club requires, how many tournaments they require. And so we sit down with, if there's a partner involved, say for instance, team policy, we'll sit down with that partner and say, okay, what are our goals and which tournaments do we want to attend this year? Okay. And then we mark those out on the calendar, and then we look and see what that corresponds with in the challenge guides with the curriculum, right? Because those might stop, we might have an individual event that week that's coming up. Great, that's so easy to integrate the two, right? Because if I have an IE speech, then great, I can do something in community and show them what I'm about to do at tournament. But if I have a different type of project, then I really need to consider if I'm going to be able to gear up for tournament at the same time that I'm trying to get that project done. So yeah, I think that it's just, they're so similar and like-minded. And it's the same as the strands, right? Is that they're really not separate. Like we're doing this together. We're all trying to get to this rhetorical phase for our children where they're really great at what they're doing. And so, but how do we just take a moment to think about, okay, how do we put these together? And that's the thing about it, is just a little bit more intention of, okay, when are these dates? When are these dates? How do we make that work with what's going on in the guide and what's going on in Stoa? And yes, over and over again, it can be done. There's a lot of parents out there doing it. But also you're right, communicating with their directors and saying, this is where we're at.
Absolutely. And they're not alone. I would say that over and over again. There are people that you've joined two communities. If you're in Stoa and Classical Conversations, there are people to support you. And so making sure that you communicate early and often to both of those leaders is so important. I love how you said you've got the guide in advance. And so you know the timing of when that tournament's going to be. In my guide, we usually write the date that will correspond to each week on that 1-page spread. And so we know exactly where things are. We'll block in what weeks are breaks, and we'll put in, oh gosh, we know we're going to, what family event or whatever, but in this case, to a tournament. And so, if the art grant for Challenge 2 is happening the week that you're going to be at a tournament, it's not a surprise to you that week. It's coming up. And so could you talk to your director about moving that presentation if that was important to your student to hear the others and present their own? Could you prepare that art grant project earlier on in the year and then have it ready to just pull out at that point rather than having to add it to an already busy spring? That's an option as well. Some families who know that they're going to compete in Stoa and that those tournaments are usually on particular days of the week might even intentionally change communities to a community day that's a Monday or Tuesday so that it doesn't often interact with the tournaments that you're going to. Some of yours may be Monday or Tuesday. So your area and what tournaments you're competing in. And so avoiding that day so that you're not missing community on a regular basis during a busy tournament season might be an option too.
Right. Definitely. And I will say that we've always been blessed to be in a community that was meeting on a Tuesday, which meant that even if we were at a tournament that was 4 days that started on Wednesday, we saw the opportunity. But I think that's a very good point, because tournaments often will start on a Wednesday, sometimes on a Thursday. But again, just kind of looking at the community calendar and seeing how does that cross over with the tournaments that we'd like to go to. Mm-hmm. And yeah, for us, it's worked brilliantly. We travel with Stoa. We've gone out of state quite a bit. So it meant that we were getting on a plane Tuesday after community. But that was important. We wanted to attend a community and make sure that we were there that week, whenever we absolutely could be. So that is a big deal. How many, just to give perspective, and I think this is, I don't want to scare parents. And I think that, again, it's developmental because the expectation it is different for each family. And so it's the same thing that you talked about scaling in Classical Conversations. I and my family are in control of how many tournaments we go to, yep, whether or not we go to out-of-state tournaments, whether or not those are 2-day tournaments or 4-day tournaments. And I make that determination. And so if I feel like that tournament's just not going to work with our Classical Conversation schedule, that's okay. It's okay to say, hey, we're going to opt out of that one, but then we're going to go to this one because this is a 2-day and my students can get this one in and we can still be in community that day. And I think that that's important, is sometimes we put expectations upon ourselves that really aren't actually there, right? Sure. And remembering that we have this ability to step in and say, what's right for my family this year in our schedule? And it's true for Stoa. It's true for Classical Conversations. I think the easiest thing is just knowing, again, just starting off and just knowing, what do I want to accomplish this year? And then how do I make that work together, right? So I love that idea of maybe seeking out a community that doesn't meet on Thursdays, because that would mean that you are out every single Thursday for a tournament, right?
And being open to each year being different as well. My son's senior year, we went to many more tournaments than we had in previous years because he really wanted to check and get to Nighthawk. And so that was our priority. My son's also involved as a competitive swimmer. And so we had to choose, are we not doing swim meets, in that busy tournament season? So there were a lot of good conversations and asking him what his priorities were and how many things could we focus on at once in order to meet his goal. And his highest goal was to make it to Nighthawk. And so that's what took precedence in our time that year.
Wow. I love that goal. Tell him I'm so proud. But really though, it's you actually bring up something that I know a lot of families are probably wondering about. What about the other activities, right? Can they still do other activities? I would actually say, hey, hands down, yes. And the reason being is because we've often done other activities, including sports, on top of Stoa and Classical Conversations. Again, it's really just a logistics game, right? So if you want to play soccer, sure, let's take a look at that. But maybe we play over the summer league, right? I had one son who excellent debater. And one year he said, I've really always wanted to play football. And we said, okay, great. So we found a local school that he could play football with. And we just looked at when the practice dates are. We looked at several different schools, who has practice on what time, right? Can we still make it to club with that? Yeah, we might be a little late over the course of 6 weeks, but it's the beginning of the season. So all of these things worked out. And I would venture to guess the vast majority of our Stoa CC kids are actually doing music. They're doing sports in addition to what they're also doing with Stoa and CC. So yeah, again, don't be deterred. It is a little bit of a logistical game, right? And some conversations to be had. Well, if they really do conflict, which ones do we want to do? But can we make this work? Can we look at a different, swim team? What does that look like? And so most people make it work.
There was a season when the kids were young. I just have two, admittedly, but I told them, okay, we're all involved in the same sport. We're all swimming and we're all doing speech and
Yeah.
debate, and we're obviously all in CC. And so batch processing, we were just all doing the same thing at the same time, made it a lot easier. I know you can't do that through every season, but it worked for us for a minute.
Definitely. So by all means, have had those seasons. So absolutely. So yeah, I think we do. I mean, we're kind of seeing some questions pop up in the chat.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and Chris, if you want to go ahead and throw us some questions, and I will go ahead and start fielding those. It looks like a question from Allison. Do any families have extracurriculars outside of Stoa? Okay, go figure. We just answered that. Is it possible to manage something else alongside both Stoa and CC? What about big families with multiple siblings? Oh, I can speak to the big family thing as well. Yeah, having 10 kids, it is a priorities game. I think, Jeannie spoke to that. I think one of the things that I learned from a homeschool conference years ago was every single year is different. Every single year, we take some feedback from our kids and say, all right, what would you like to do? What are the things that are important to you? And then we assess that together as a family and say, all right, what's feasible, right? Because we can do a lot, but maybe we don't want to do too much. And maybe we want to make sure that we prioritize family time as well. And so how do we make this work? And so the analogy she gave was that it's like a backpack and you have all the activities in your backpack, right? And it is something that you have to carry through the season. So set the backpack down, take each activity out and really think through it, pray through it. What does this mean? Why am I doing it? How important is this to me? Is this my calling versus just something I'm really interested in? And then decide which ones are negotiable and which ones are non-negotiable. And if they're non-negotiable, well, great. So we have that basic there. And then if they're negotiable, then let's determine what we can actually fit in our schedule. And so with big families, I think logistically, that's probably why I've defaulted to a block schedule. Is like, for instance, right now I have some kids, an older one who's in guitar, younger ones who are in youth symphony. They both play cello. Next year we'll have another two that are starting in their instruments. And so it really is just okay, how much time do we have? Which activities are most important to us? And can we make this work? And it just requires an intentional conversation on the part of you and your family saying, what do we want to put as priority here? But I will say, yes, having, 10 kids in a house and some of them are different. The one thing I will tell you is classical conversations was a non-negotiable for us, right? That was somewhere where we met not just the bigger community, but we met as a family. So as a family, we're all there in community together. It was part of our family time. And then we enjoyed being able to have those conversations about things that my older kids had already read and the younger kids were now reading. And now we're talking about it together at the table. And then also Stoa for us is a non-negotiable because as my kids get older and I have my kids start at 12, it is that family bonding time for us. As that so much of their character development, so much of that pressure of competition, so much of how do you react to losing, how do you take that feedback came through. And we were able to do that as a family, especially my teenagers. It's such an important time, right? So that was a family bonding experience for us. And I don't want people to I want families to realize that that's actually part of being a big family. So, when I've got 4 kids in Stoa as a big family and we all get to come together and say, hey, great job. And don't worry, you'll get there. And hey, I remember my first year when I went, 06, and it's okay. that was a precious part of us bonding as a big family, actually. And so, yeah, I think that some of those, like you said, some years we're all going to do this. These are our non-negotiables, and we're all going to bond together in this, and that's actually okay, because these are skills that are going to help you for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Anything you have on that, just as we talked about those.
No, I think that's great. I think I've heard both of us stress the need for communication very often. Communication within our families, communications with our husband, our kids, and the tutors and leaders supporting us, and absolutely communication with the Lord. He has put these children in your life, and they are a blessing, and He's given you a purpose to home educate them, and just seeking His will for what He wants you to prioritize. He knows if they're supposed to take cello or be competitive swimmers or play soccer or football. And so prioritizing those things with the leading from the Holy Spirit is super important. I would also say that as we have those opportunities, just reevaluating is okay. So if we've made this plan at the beginning of the year and we get into the middle and we are just running ragged, taking a breath and giving yourself permission to reevaluate is an okay thing as well. Because sometimes when you hit
That's
January,
really
February,
important.
it's a little rough.
Oh, that's a really important piece. You're right. And taking the time to just, in what I call Sabbath, sometimes it doesn't have to be a Sabbath, maybe it's a week where we say, you know what, we're just going to put some stuff down this week. We're just going to add some extra time of just, I'm going to take everything off my agenda for today. Right. And we're just going to be together, and that's okay. That's what home education allows us to do. We're in control, right? We're in control of whether or not we do Latin that week. And I know some of my kids don't want to. And we're also in control of whether or not we do that extra tournament, right? Maybe it's not the year for that extra tournament. Maybe we don't need it. Maybe we just need to spend time together as a family. And that's okay. It's our choice, right? But that's a great point.
And that's the priority, right? We only get 18 years with these kids and then they leave. And so taking advantage of the time that you have with them, getting to know them, spending that intentional conversation time with them is so important.
That is good. Do you have a question? Yeah.
I have somebody asking a very charged question, and I wonder if someone's going to take us up on it. Has anyone created a matchup doc with the obvious overlaps? I would love to empower this person to try that out. I would love that because there are so many possible matchups, but I also know that Alyssa has a great resource for us coming after this call. And so I think that will be a jumping off point for this particular listener. I think they might really appreciate the material in there.
Right. So yeah, this is one of the reasons that we're having this call, is to announce the fact that we do have that document. So thanks so much. It's like you read my mind. So yeah, what I did was I went through and I queried a ton of people who do classical conversations in Stoa throughout the nation. And we had a lot of conversations about how do these two integrate. And my attempt was to take that, break it up into challenge levels, and really give you an overview for each challenge level of what are the obvious overlaps. And then also at the bottom of that, what are some testimonies of people who have taken something from each side and then made those work together. And sometimes it goes in one direction where there's something about Stoa that they've used in classical conversations and something about classical conversations they've used in Stoa. But in addition to that, you'll see that document, it's going to be posted on the Stoa website on Wednesday. And there's also going to be a call to action for the community. So more testimonials, giving other families ideas. Like, where did you do it well? So in terms of, like, for instance, there's a testimonial in there from my son who went all the way through. He was a little foundations, little kid, all the way through Challenge 4 and graduated. And what we did in the summertime for his senior thesis is we said, hey, senior thesis is coming up and you've got a really busy debate year. So you're already going to be researching this resolution. How would you like to make those overlap? And he said, great idea. I'm going to look at some different aspects of this energy resolution, and I'm going to write about what interests me most. And I'm already going to be doing that research, so it's going to overlap for both. So he had an excellent senior thesis on the future of nuclear technology, right? And so it was just amplified by the fact that he was already going to be doing that research, and then he had to write this paper. So he might as well just not put that research to waste, but actually use that for a senior thesis. And so there's testimonials and they're like that for, hey, where did this really work out for us? But like Jeannie says, they're infinite. Like there are infinite possibilities of how to integrate the two, because there's so much there. There's just a wealth of richness in that classical curriculum and those conversations that are happening in community. There's so much takeaway that you can then turn into a platform for any one of these tournaments and for clubs. And I will tell you, I never go into a speech round without learning something.
Absolutely.
And right.
Oh, goodness. Yes.
Right. Things that I have gone on to use, like for instance, like I saw one about ornamental gourds. So you know what my garden is going to look like this year. It's going to include ornamental gourds. But there's so many that we didn't want to pinpoint and say there's a 1-for-1, right? So if you have this project, you have to do an interp. If you have this project, you have to do an expos. We didn't want to do that because really it lends itself to a vast amount of possibilities. So it's having that conversation with your student and saying, hey, what about this? You seem really into this. Would you like to create a speech over this? And what kind of speech would you like to do? And so many families have done that well in different ways. So thanks for asking that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as the longer that families are involved in a STOA community, they get more exposure to the different types of speech that are available. They can hear, they have the opportunity to listen to their peers developing those things, and that they expand their ideas to, oh, maybe I could do that. And so giving yourself the permission that as you join a club, if this is maybe the first year you're trying out both, it takes a minute to kind of absorb all the grammar and get to know all the possibilities. And as your student especially experiences and gets to observe, I know Ryan wishes that he had spent more time in a STOA club once he finished in his senior year, because he didn't even get to delve into many of the speech opportunities that he could have had he started younger. So give yourself some time to see what's available. There's so many possibilities out there.
Yeah, and that's what we love about homeschooling, right? Is that we have the opportunity to get creative. So, all right, I've got another one from Jennifer. It says, how can challenged students navigate debate and community while also competing in STOA? Our community has struggled with that. Okay. I'm going to make some presumptions based on that struggle, just based on what our community has seen. And I think that it's that we have some STOA debaters who kind of come in and want to run the strand, right? They're like, hey, I know what I'm doing here, right?
Or not participate at all because they think it's not worth their time. I've seen the opposite too.
Right. And so maybe coming in with the wrong attitude. And I think Jeannie spoke to this earlier, is that really is a heart issue, is how do I serve my community well? There's a way to do it very well. There's a way to be of assistance to the community and serve them because you might have more expertise in debate rather than, hey, let me take this over because I know what I'm talking about and you don't, or never mind, I'm just going to go ahead and fade out into, the background because I already know about this, right? So Jeannie, how would you say that that's done well in your community?
If I had a student who felt like this wasn't worth their time, or one that felt like they wanted to run it, I think I would sit down one-on-one with that student. If maybe I was the tutor or parent in the class, I'd talk to that student's parent, but encourage them that this is maybe a pre-coaching opportunity. Maybe they're thinking about being a junior coach in their own club, and this is a great opportunity to come alongside a friend who doesn't know as much about or hasn't practiced as much in their debating, and this is an opportunity to gently coach them and to think back what that felt like as they were a brand new debater in a club and how they felt when somebody kind of snubbed them, that they didn't know as much or didn't feel like it was worth their time to talk to them because they weren't very good at debate, if that happened to them. Just help them to understand the empathy of the situation and encourage them that this is an opportunity and not a waste of their time. What do you think? Have you seen it?
I agree. And it's part of humility. That's the piece that we're trying to teach them, right? It's great that you feel like you're becoming rhetorical in this. I love that. Now, how do you wield those skills well? That's part of becoming rhetorical in anything, right? So if we're going to be communicators, which that's where we're trying to get them to, is are we communicating in a prideful way?
Mhm.
Or are we just ducking out of the responsibility that we have to our friends and community? So I love that. Just empathize with that first time that you walked into Stoa Club. Everything was so overwhelming. You didn't know what you were doing. You were incredibly intimidated. You were thinking, wow, can I do this? Remember what that feels like. And then how would you have assisted? Like, how could you have talked to yourself to encourage yourself and then use that in community to assist your community?
I think we can
Right?
also draw their attention to there might be other things that person, their friend in community, may do better than they do. There
Yeah.
may be a piece of maybe they translate Latin like a boss, and they they know their verbs backwards and forwards, and they've been practicing forever. It's possible that this particular student is not good at everything, and that there are other skills out there that those other students might be able to teach them. And so being teachable as well as humble is also important to remember in this situation.
It's very true. And I'm going to speak to this from the director end. I think also being intentional about those Stoa kids that are in your classroom, because I know a lot of them oftentimes tend to err on the let me take over, right? Because they're talkers, they're
They know.
communicators. So
Yeah.
let me just tell you, let me tell you how this is supposed to go. So I know that a lot of our directors have gone intentionally to those students and said, hey, I would love your help and assistance. I recognize that you know a lot about this, but then they give them parameters. Can you help me for 5 minutes explain this term, right? And so instead of just giving the free for all conversation, just say like, I need your assistance here. And so that way we just have some boundaries, right? Okay, Stoa student, this is where you need to stay, right? Stay in your lane. All right, please.
Yeah.
And that seems to have gone really well of setting that expectation out in the very beginning with that strand and saying, this is what I expect from you. And this is where it would also be beneficial if you didn't overstep me, right? Like this is where it's going to work out well in our relationship. And I have seen that work out as opposed to, again, it's just intention, right? Going into and hoping that that works out because you have some kids who know what they're talking about, but then some don't. That tends to work out poorly. It's the ones who say, okay, how can we make this relationship work? That it tends to work out really well. So
That's a good point. And also caveating that this particular community in this, first LD debate ever, it's probably not going to reach the level of LD expertise that you might have experienced in your Stoa community. So let's just caveat that this is baby step one. And this is as far as we're going to go and take these kids for this particular event. And I think that's also a skill for a student to learn is when you're explaining something, how to read when you've now crossed the line and you've started to over explain and you've completely lost your audience.
right.
And so just being sensitive to help those students understand, hey, we're only going to go so far. And that's where this group is ready to be. So
It looks like we have another one more. You may be seeing this. It's from Allison. How can we equip local challenge directors to learn from Stoa to better help them tutor their class in debate and IEP? That's a good one.
Well, we do intend to take this webinar and the resource that you're creating and provide it to Classical Conversations families. And I hope that that will encourage Classical Conversations families to see Stoa as a resource for them for debate. As long as they have a local community, I think that that's really helpful. That the resources that you all provide are wonderful, but I think the missing piece there is that friend in a local Stoa community who will come alongside them and help them through it. Because we all know learning something brand new is really intimidating. And sometimes those challenge directors are learning something new in every one of those strands. And so I would just encourage any of our moms that are doing Stoa and in a Classical Conversations community to take that first step and reach out to your beloved challenge director and offer to help them walk through this brand new thing of debate. I think they would really appreciate knowing that they have a friend who can point out some resources for them. And I think that personal connection makes all the difference.
Yeah, that's essential, is that relationship. And typically you do have a Stoa community around you. You have people within your classical conversations community. A lot of you are here because you have that crossover already, right?
Mhm.
So taking advantage of that crossover when it comes to relationship. I will also say that also not being intimidated. I've heard this feedback before from people within my community is, gosh, I don't know if that student should give their IE because it's intimidating to the other students who are not in STOA, which grieves me a little bit because I don't know that we should ever really see somebody who's doing something maybe more rhetorically than us
Mhm.
and then want to avoid that, right? That should be inspirational for us. We should see that as, oh, look, I could accomplish that too. That's a potential for me. And so seeing those people as resources rather than separate, right? They're separate. Those are the Stoic kids. They're not, and in Stoa, oh, those are the CC kids. They're really not, right? That's our community right there. And we can assist one another. Again, if we're intentional about the relationship instead of avoiding the relationship, it really actually works better. And so take each other's strengths and put them together. And guess what? That's where we get that dynamic duo. Like that's the whole intent
Mhm.
is we can be even better together if we're willing to take that feedback and see that as an inspiration to one another.
Absolutely. I agree. I see another great idea on helping challenge directors in the chat, inviting them to a tournament to be a judge. I cannot agree more. That is a fantastic opportunity. They will walk out just floored from that experience the first time, and they will come back. I promise. Inviting them to invite the class to a tournament if they've bought in is even better. Just even to sit in a room and observe a debate or speeches is a great experience.
Well, thank you for that, Margaret, because that's been a big push for us too. Is if you want to see this in action, great, come see this in action, right? Be a part of this, be part of our community. Even if it's you never sign up for STOA, but wow, wouldn't it be great to come watch these kids and what they're doing? Similar to when kids, in our community do a play or anything like that, and then they invite you. You want to go see what they're participating in. And so tournaments are an awesome opportunity for everybody to participate, even if they're not a member.
That's a really great point, Alyssa. I think maybe if we made it even more personal to say, I would love you to watch little Jimmy do his debate at this particular time. I think sometimes families from CC view the tournament as just this like week, long commitment. Whereas if we broke it down and said, we want you to come and watch our child do this particular thing, maybe they'll stay longer, but it might be more accessible if we just broke it down to that one opportunity.
Definitely, by all means. And I have assisted parents in the past in classical conversations that were trying to understand debate better. And there's an open resource of what we do in judge orientation, of how we just give a basic rundown on what debate is. It gives you an overview of what that looks like. And so it's a great resource, especially if you go to a tournament and you just sit down on the judge orientation, for 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden you have this reference for, okay, I see the intent. I see how debate works. And that's just, I love that idea of just, hey, go listen to the JO once or twice and
Right.
you'll feel a lot more comfortable with what's going on. So
hearing something you think described in a different way or from a different perspective. Absolutely. That's so helpful. There's a new question asking, how do we balance CC work when NITOC comes around? And for us, NITOC was after our CC community ended. And so that was separate enough in time that we were able to finish one and start the other. Was that the same for you, Alyssa, or did your community go later?
our community goes, we're the same with you, is our community ends before NITOC begins. So that's a great cutoff for us. I will say that there's a lot of classical conversation directors that are now in STOA. It didn't used to always be that way. But they kept coming to tournaments and they kept watching these students and what they did. And so they got inspired and they said, we're going to do this too. So it is taken in consideration in our calendar. I know that's actually the same for a lot of CC communities, is that they'll take some of that calendar into consideration when they put their calendar together. So we've always ended before NITOC began. And NITOC typically comes later in the season. So hopefully most of what you've got done in curriculum is done, right? So we don't see a lot of crossover. Yeah.
And if you're looking forward to it next year, now's the time to go talk to your director and say, hey, this is something we're aiming for. It'd be great to have our community finish before we went to NITALK next year, because many are planning their calendar right now.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, that's going on now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it looks like we're at 7:02.
Mm-hmm.
So we thank you all for coming. Chris, did you want to close us out?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for your expertise. Alyssa and Jeannie, we've learned a lot tonight, and I'm excited because I know how complementary these organizations are. Our CC students are way better debaters, and our debaters are way better CC students. It's nice to have an organization that has the same goal and does things in a complementary way that makes our students better all the way around. So I'm excited about the tool that you said is coming out on Wednesday. I'm excited about the call to action, and I'm just excited about the relationship going forward. Thank you for your expertise. I know it was really good for me, and I hope it was really good for everybody else. With that being said, we'll resign for the night. I'll pray us out, and then we will see you guys soon. Dear God, we love you. We thank you. We thank you for both of these organizations. We thank you for the many, many volunteers and parents that make these organizations work. We're so thankful that we get to be a part of an organization that's changing the face of America. That these students are going to be the leaders going forward. They're going to carry the gospel of Jesus Christ to a broken and lost world. And we're so thankful that we get to shepherd them on this path. We pray that you will be with us this week. We pray that we will do and say all that you ask us to do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you all. We appreciate you, and we will see you soon.
Have a good night.